Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell from the Hawthorn Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, you got MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well. You are 13 weeks through your fantasy footy season. You've got 10 left to go, and importantly, just 1 week left of your multi-bye rounds. There's plenty of stuff to get to as we head into round 14. Joining me on this week's episode, I got Benny Gogos. Hello, buddy. How you doing?
Great, thanks, mate. It's crazy we're rounding the bend. I can still remember the first moments of pre-season, so time flies when you're having fun, mate.
I remember doing some 50 most relevance with you very early on in the preseason, I said. That is for sure. And that is now at least a good 6 months in the rear vision mirror. But that is okay. It's been a long time. Consider him, for those that have played fantasy footy for a while, the Josh Dunkley of the 2016 season, who played a couple of games back to back, wasn't seen for a good couple of weeks, but came back right at a crucial time in the season for us. I'm referring to Jordox is back on the podcast. Hello, buddy. How you doing?
Hello, mate. Yes, good to be back. He went on to win a premiership that year too. So, yeah. Well, maybe I'm in for a good finish to the year.
Ominous signs for you, my friends. All right, lads, there is plenty to talk about in a moment. We want to get to some of our Patreon questions. Of course, if you're loving what you're getting from the Coaches Panel, you can always support us. All the links for that are at coachespanel.tv. There's exclusive content, access to groups, and you get your question on the podcast. That is just some of the rewards you get, as well as some extra podcasts, a bunch of other stuff. Want to talk trades, premiums, and whether or not we should sideways them. I want to get to that for a lot of coaches. And of course, look at the 4 teams that have just completed their scheduled rest and who are some guys we should go and get. Before we get into any of that, lay of the land for you, coach, to let you know where life is at. Round 14, you got 8 teams on the bye this week. It is a painful week for coaches, probably anyway. Then with the AFL fixture changes and West Coast and Richmond now also into this, it is pain city for a lot of coaches. Again, we'll talk about that in a second. Here's what it means for you though. DreamTeam and SuperCoach, this time last week, they bumped 2 additional trades into the format for you. So you can use them now anytime over the remaining course of the season. And they upped the amount of trades you can make this week to a capacity of 4. AFLFantasy, they have done the same for you this week. They have upped your capacity to 4 trades, not the usual 3 trades available to you, but that is it after that. And for this round, only for the last time this year, please, Jesus, no COVID, more impacts on our games. It will be a best 18 players on the field. If they're not on the field, or you don't have a loophole or an emergency or whatever, that doesn't count. They've got to be on the field. That is what you need to know. And the teams that are on the bye this week, you can trade them in and out of your team as often as you like. But the moment that last game gets underway, they are locked out. And if you've put the captaincy on one of them to take a loophole, then that captaincy score is going to get doubled and locked in. That is the lay of the land. All right, Benny, let's jump into straight away. Looking at some of the teams that have come off their scheduled rest for us. It's just the 4 teams, not the 6. Jordox, you too, we want to get you involved on this. And I almost want to look club by club. We'll start at Brisbane in a sec. And the aim is pretty simply, if we were to look to trade in players from this club, kind of across the format, some may be more specific and favoured than others. Who are the players we should be considering, whether it's value, whether it's top end, whatever it actually is? Let's talk about Brisbane. Ben, who are some Lions that we should really be considering and looking at over this next kind of week to 2 weeks as trade-in targets?
Yeah, well, there's a few that comes directly to mind. So I think you've got to look at the premiums. Now, Jared Lyons is the one that's been incredible. He's been outstanding throughout the season. The beauty with Lyons is he's never going to get a tag. Nope. Downside is his price at a top price, 776,000. In DreamTeam, he's averaging 111 for the season. Right now, we're at a stage with our teams basically across the board where we're trying to complete them.
Yeah.
So we're looking at sort of that 9 trades, maybe the 10 trades, and potentially by the end of the week, we might be staring at 7
6
or 6 or 5. Yeah, it's getting very low, MJ. So conserving money, I would suggest potentially looking past the Jared Lyons.
Yep.
So I look a bit further down the line. I look at someone like a Hugh McCluggage.
Nice.
So we're bringing him in for 65,000. Now, he's been down over the past sort of 3, 4, 5 weeks. But prior to that, he was having a run of hundreds that was probably the first time in his career we've really seen what he can do. So just looking at his numbers here, he had 700s in a row from round 3 all the way up to round 9. Very consistent. Copped a little bit of attention against the Giants. Didn't see the Richmond game, so I can't speak on that. But he's someone that clearly is going to be a fantasy star for the next 5+ years.
Yeah.
Concern with him is that he is so damaging. As we all know, if you've ever watched a Brisbane game, he's one of the best inside 50 exponents we have in the AFL. So he's going to get tagged at points in the season. Brisbane is going deep. So again, we look further afield. Daniel Rich is the one in the back line having his breakout season, averaging around that 100 mark. Again, paying top price MJ. It's something I don't love to do.
Yep.
Lachie Neale's the guy that I think is the one that really screams out to me. I get a little bit excited about him, but it's not the time right now. So he's at 740, and he's obviously had a down year after an incredible season, but he's going to drop a fair bit further. So he's coming into Dream Team this week with a break even of 169. So
yeah, it's similar across the formats.
Yeah. We can wait on this like 1 or 2 weeks and potentially be buying him for around that 690 mark. So from Brisbane MJ, Lachie Neale's the guy that I think is the one to be waiting on. And the other guys to me are not people that we need to be attaining this week. I like all of those names. I wouldn't bring them up if I didn't.
Yeah.
But just be mindful. We're trying to get to our finished team with as many trades as we can possibly have. And that's going to be a really difficult thing, especially with West Coast and Richmond, which we've spoken about in previous weeks.
Yeah, it's cool. In a moment, Jordox, I want to get your take on some Carlton players to kind of look at in just a moment. But I'm a big fan on that Lachie Neale call. Again, not this week, nor the following week. He's coming up against Geelong. Mark O'Connor did a really nice job in tagging, not just against him, but against numerous opponents this year. He's done a really nice defensive midfield role. In 2 weeks' time after that, he's going to be priced around about that 530 marker in SuperCoach, which is just crazy value given what his price point was at the start of the year, and in and around 700,000 around in Dream Team and AFL Fantasy. After that matchup against Geelong, this is their next few matches. Adelaide, go and look at the history of midfielders against Adelaide this year, especially clearance first touch players. They smoke them. You want more proof? Go look at Jack Steele's game before 3/4 time. He was killing it. After that, St Kilda. Go and look at some of the Adelaide scores in that game. They brained it through the midfield. After that, Richmond. They ain't tagging him. They will happily allow him 35 touches, no problems asked. Then after that, Hawthorn. They ain't tagging. They'll happily try to put Tom Mitchell head to head. And as great as Tom Mitchell is, Lachie Neale, if he's fit, is going to dance every day around that man. And then after that is Gold Coast, the easiest team in the midfield to score against at the moment. And I don't care if someone says, Tuke Miller might go to him. No. Tuke's an offensive weapon in his own. And if he's stopping anyone, it's Zorko, not Lachie Neale. And so I'm on board with that call. I think Neale's the one. If you can wait 2 weeks for that final M8, with that fixture, with that price, he's the one off the lines. I think it's a ripping call, man.
Even a Collingwood in the prelim week, MJ. So round 22, home, Collingwood, obviously, like, they're going to be around the bottom of the ladder. It's a fantastic fixture.
Yeah.
That's one of the best fixtures I think you can have for the rest of the season. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, if you can hold a John Newcombe in that spot for a week or two and just bank that 60, 70, whatever he gives you, he's not going to have 14 tackles every week. But if you can bank that 60 or 70 and get to a Lachie Neale at that bottomed out price, he'll be fit, he'll be firing, he's off a rest. Yeah, I'm a big fan. Let's talk Carlton players, though, Jordox. Another disappointing season for him, but who are some of the Blues? If we wanted to pick a Carlton player across the formats, where's the eye going to?
Okay, so Carlton's a bit harder, and just because Brisbane's premiums are, Benny had a whole list of them there, and Carlton, I've had to look a little bit deeper.
Making you work on your return, mate.
Yeah, no, it's good. Cripps is one that I just can't get my head around. Things might be a bit calmer. I think he'd signed on, or he's going to sign on, or there was talk of that. He's had a bye. He should be fresher. I just can't with Cripps. Walsh
is that because you've been burnt by the past? Just out of curiosity, is that because you've just got a bit of a sour taste in your mouth out of him more than anything else?
Look, if I'm honest, yeah. But also I just don't see anything there that tells me he's gonna flick a switch.
Sure.
Because I think it's been his breakout in a fantasy sense was 2018, and that was 3 years ago. He hasn't been anywhere near that for many reasons.
Sure.
Well, just on that one as well with Paddy Cripps. So up until round 8, I would agree with you. He's had a very, very sort of poor, very average season, but he put together a very good 3 weeks against Melbourne, Hawthorn, and Sydney. So a couple of decent teams there. Now, my concern with him, and I would actually be defending him, I think around that sort of 585,000 mark, which is what he was in Dream Team in round 10.
Yeah,
I think he was an exceptional buy. But my concern, and it's not a concern so much with Patrick Cripps, but more a concern with the Carlton coaching panel. He was playing a lot of forward in round 12 against West Coast. So he seemed to be moving fine. He was moving incredibly well against Sydney in round 11. My only concern with him is the body, and I probably would want to see him play one more week. But he is the type of guy that stands out to me, as we were talking about MJ, with that price point. 645K is still a very good deal. He's got a break even of 90 in Dream Team, so I wouldn't personally be ruling him out.
SuperCoach, he's 467,000, by the way.
Wow.
Yeah, and I would have think SuperCoach was his game, but even his scores there. So look, if you want Cripps and you like Cripps, I'm not going to stop you. And a few weeks ago, if you jumped on, to get those 3 tons in a row, but if he came out and scored a 50 this week, I just don't think any of us would be that surprised.
Yeah.
But anyway, look, Walsh is absolutely flying. He's a jet. I want to talk about a couple of different ones, and our back lines have been probably our favourite lines this year. I think we've all had pretty strong back lines for the bulk of the year. If not, or if you're looking for another one, there's a couple of Carlton guys that are a bit interesting. So Nick Newman really caught my eye before the bye. Not so much his numbers, more his role. He's come in and he's just starting to look a bit more like the Nick Newman we saw at Sydney, who just wants the ball, give me the ball. I'll give you the ball, now give me the ball back. And I've been waiting for him and Doherty to start a bit of a kick-to-kick type scenario that they had, that Cade Simpson had with Doherty in those glory years. Glory from a fantasy point of view, of course. So look, he's a bit of a wait and see. He copped a pretty big head knock 2 weeks ago. He's had the bye. He comes back in this week. Just looking at Dream Team, he's probably not in a huge bargain at the moment. He's under 600, one to keep an eye on. And then the other one is, can't believe I'm saying it, but Zach Williams.
No, I think you're right.
He's such an interesting one because GWS, he was never one that I was, desperate to have. And we all kind of thought he'd go Carlton, play midfield and just brain it. And it's been, it's been quite a interesting first year for him. He's been thrown in the midfield. He's been, now he's gone back. But just looking at his scores, looking in Dream Team Fantasy, 2 of his last 3 have been 90s. There's an unfortunate 60 sandwiched in between. But again, it's kind of like the Nick Haynes one. If you think that role is going to get him back to what he was doing, and we've seen him do in that role at GWS, he's a bargain.
Yeah, I think that's a really good shout. Yeah, like that's a really nice comparison in the sense of we know what he can do in the role. The issue with Zach is pretty much durability. is the concern through there. I think that's a really nice shout in terms of what he's done in SuperCoach in that format. He's 445,600. His past 4 scores, 85, 124, 80, 103. And Carlton in the next month play GWS, Adelaide, Fremantle, and Geelong. And then it does open up a little bit more, including a round 23 matchup against GWS for an additional time. The only slight risk there might be if Matt de Boer does play that forward tag role, that he sort of tried to play a little bit on Aaron Hall over the weekend. He might be the one they go
shrugged
to.
Him off.
Yeah, he shrugged him off very, very quickly.
The other thing too is he came to Carlton to be a midfielder, and they've kind of got Cripps and Walsh and the midfield looking good. Ed Kerno's had a really good year. So he's gone back to where he played at GWS, but they've got Doherty and they brought Sard across, and Nick Newman's now back. So, yeah, I don't know. He may end up forward yet, but if he has that role at that price, he's worth a look.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Zach Williams call. I think, Ben brings up that great point earlier about we're desperately trying to get these last few premium options onto our field. And while Williams has had an indifferent season, history tells us when he's on the field, he can be a premium for us across all formats of the game. His value at that price point, he's not getting any cheaper. The fixture's solid without being spectacular. I think that's a good shout, Jordox. I think if you're looking for a D6 and you've got the big dogs, then that's important. You do need to make sure you've got the guys that could take a season away from you, which is this year it's Rory Laird, it's Callum Mills. I think Lockie Whitfield's going to be that guy, given that GWS fixture, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, during this episode too. So yeah, if you're in a position of a D5 or a D6 and you've got the big dogs, yeah, man, I'm all on board that.
The one I'll throw up there as well is Sam Doherty.
Yeah, interesting.
He's been a clear runaway as one of the best top tier defenders this year, but I actually think it's probably a good idea for coaches to now start looking at fading him as an option.
Yeah, good call.
So Nick Newman has come in and has basically taken that halfback role from Doc. Doc's been pushing up more to a halfback, more to a wing / Jack Crisp type role, like a half kick behind the play, almost pushing into that midfield at times. It's not a role that he's suited to, especially like he's still only 18 months off his second knee injury. He's never been an incredibly agile footballer in his career anyway. And now we're seeing Zach Williams as being the next linchpin that he has to have a great 10 weeks, because then someone's on the chopping block, whether it be a list manager, whether it be a recruiter, whether it be coach. They need to get him confident. I don't think that this spells good signs for Doherty's fantasy scoring. So if you don't currently have him, maybe look elsewhere.
Yeah, I think it's a good call.
He's copped a bit of criticism too. Probably first time in his career as an established player, and particularly as a co-captain with his disposal, which has been off. And he's getting the numbers, but he hasn't had a great year. So it's a fair shout because he's not cheap or anything. He's reasonably priced, but it could be one that target a bit of value instead. Yeah,
it's a good call. All right, let's talk about Essendon. Again, it's just the 4 clubs coming off the bye. Benny, you want to get your take on that? There are some big, dominant midfield premiums they've been delivering for us. One is Zach Merritt, who's pretty good this year across all formats. Normally a bit more favourable to Dream Team and AFL fantasy scoring, but he's been solid for us across in SuperCoach. And normally you'd think a guy that's averaging 111 in Dream Team and fantasy and 111 in SuperCoach, you go, well, you're probably the top bomber that people are looking at. But everybody that I seem to see on Twitter and Facebook and as part of our Patreon community, when he keeps seeing what Darcy Parish has been doing and find themselves going, I want me some Parish. Here's my question for you. I think I know the answer, but I want to ask it for the benefit of others that are eyeing him off. Can you spend the big bucks going after Darcy Parish? He's $1,000 in SuperCoach. In Dream Team, Darcy Parish, $862,000.
What is this world we are in?
And in AFL Fantasy is $879,000. Can you drop that amount of cash on Darcy Parish?
And before you answer,
Oh,
his 3-round average,
this will be good.
Team AF, is 142, 3 round.
151 in SuperCoach,
average,
by the way.
His 5-round average is 135.
140 in SuperCoach.
So,
go, Betty.
Yeah.
Look, yeah, you go, Ben. You go.
He's been quite special.
He has.
Look, I'll answer this with another question. Was Tuke Miller a good option last week?
For those that purchased him, they would absolutely feel justified based off what he gave them last week, for sure.
100%. And look,
It's a great comparison.
I speak about this a fair bit, obviously. I speak about this all the time. We're always looking for value, but every so often there's one guy that we could look at and say, hey, this guy might be the guy that wins me the car, or the car was of past years. But Parish we're looking at right now, and we're thinking, hey, is this guy a Dane Swan? Is this guy a Tom Rockcliffe of years gone past?
Yeah.
Now, personally, I look at Darcy Parish, and I've been a football lover since I was a little kid. I can't help but think Darcy Parish is that 80s guy. So I look at these numbers and I can't believe it. I probably personally couldn't really go there. I prefer the game of a Tuke Miller because he's even a little bit more contested. He's a little bit more of that tackle guy.
Yeah.
I have a warmer feeling towards him. But if you're a big fan of Darcy Parish, he has not given you any reason to suggest that he can't do it for the rest of the season.
It's true.
So look, I would suggest if you can bring him into your team, then it means everything else is set up really well. And I want to hammer home that
That's
point.
a good call.
Yeah, you need to have everything else ready to go. He basically is the final upgrade, or you have a guarantee of sorting out your upgrade maybe next week or 2 weeks down the line, like we're talking about, maybe a Lockie Neal, someone you've got the money available to. For the vast majority of teams, and again, I really want to hammer home that point, the vast majority of teams, Darcy Parish, even if you can afford him, isn't the best option for your teams.
Yeah.
But if you've done your cash generation incredibly well, he's someone you can be looking at. And at 862 MJ, you're not getting value for money. Even if he delivers 130 from here, he's basically priced at about 130. You need him to almost be doing that for you.
Yeah, you need him to do what he's done in the last 3 weeks. Like, Jordox brought up that 140, rounding it across the formats from now to the end of the year. And to do that for 10 weeks, I don't care who you are. Not many people can do 10 weeks of 140 plus. No. Also knowing that Essendon will have some of those midfielders pop back into that side at some point. They're not moving him out of that role, but you get a Dylan Shield back in, he's going to clip some of that points per minute. Absolutely. Even a Devon Smith, who's very much a role player, who's likely back this week, and a half forward. There's a little bit of points that is going to come because these are smart footballers. They know how to get into damaging spots. They know how to read the play. So yeah, I get why someone would be keen on Darcy, but knowing that cash generation is hard across all the formats, that trades are getting limited in Dream Team and SuperCoach. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a unique experience that a coach can go, yeah, I can drop top dollar and overlook guys at 50, 100, 150,000 cheaper that could, it's obviously it could, go at a 120 run and save you 150K or 100K. I'm with you on that, Ben.
And for perspective, if you don't have Merritt or Parish and you're tossing up between the two, I mean, in Dream Team, you save $100,000 getting Merritt. And Merritt, you touched on him before, MJ, his season it's actually been incredible because Zach Merritt, the problem I've found with Merritt over the years is every now and then he'll just drop a 60 or a 50 randomly.
Like he did a month ago?
Yes, he did. He dropped a 60 against Freo, but apart from that, he scored tons in every single game.
Yeah, he's been brilliant.
Doesn't quite have the ceiling, but yeah, 100K for Parrish. Yeah, I tend to agree with Ben.
All right.
Let's get on to just quickly, MJ. Let's smash onto some of these options that I probably prefer a little bit more.
Yeah, let's get in down to those ones.
Yeah. So Jordan Ridley is someone that I still see as being an option.
Yep.
An option that I love or that I'm really excited by. But we've got to be looking at the price we're paying for him now.
Yeah, buy low for sure.
Yeah, we are paying an absolute pittance for him, and in the best sort of a world where like all the moons align, he can be one of the best scoring defenders in the game. So
that's true.
What would need to occur for that, I think, to play out is probably a Dyson Heppel might go down with an injury or might miss a few games. Nick Hind is another one that's sort of been taking a few of his points.
Yep.
But that's sort of the scenario that needs to occur. But I do not dislike the idea of Jordan Ridley being your final upgrade, or your Jordan Ridley being someone that allows you to go out and get, a Lockie Neal in 2 weeks, especially as a D6. I think there's going to be teams with a lot worse D6 come the end of the season than a Jordan Ridley. So
yeah, nice.
He's one that I like. Nick Hind as a forward. Forwards have been a really tough sort of spot for us throughout the season. He's been consistent throughout. The beauty with Nick Hind is he is so determined, and he's relentless. He will keep running for you. He'll have a game where he'll be on 40 at 3/4 time. I think we've seen this play out maybe numerous times across the last month or 6 weeks. And he'll come home like a train. He'll get that 40 points because he's always sprinting. He's just so desperate.
Yeah.
So desperate. And I think he's one of those players that, he probably came into the AFL as maybe a bit of a late bloomer, never had a whole heap of talent. And so he's absolutely got the best out of himself, and he's absolutely killing it. He's one of my favorite footballers to watch in 2021. So
yeah, he's good.
He's fantastic. Now, Kyle Langford's
That's
the other
an interesting one. Yes.
Yeah. So we can pick up Kyle Langford as a forward, but he's been playing almost exclusively as like a midfielder and a bit of a wingman over the past 4, 5, 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And really, that's a transition that Essen had always suggested was going to be the play for Kyle Langford. So now we're finally seeing that. As we spoke about a few minutes ago, there's a few Essendon midfielders to come back in. How does that affect his role? We don't yet know. My opinion on that is that, unfortunately, I think it will affect his role.
Yeah.
However, I don't think that that's the right play for Essendon. I think right now Essendon should be trying to develop these guys as much as possible. Someone like Kyle Langford has just shown his career best form as almost a full-time midfielder. He should be getting the role. Whether that actually occurs, we do not yet know. But he's a guy that's put up, a huge average over the last 5 rounds. And for teams that are looking for that final forward upgrade, an extremely unique selection as well, MJ.
Yeah.
I really like him. And I think we've spoken about the big names, but Kyle Langford's someone that I would be really looking at right now as a bit of a fun selection, something that might turn out great for you.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, hey, guess what? There's only one person that can win Dream Team. You've had some fun along the way anyway, or SuperCoach or AF or whatever your game is, but he's got everything that's making you think right now he could be a great pick for the future.
Really like that one. For those concerned, Dylan Shield, according to the injury list, is 2 to 3 weeks away. So that's probably the biggest name. McGrath's, sorry, mate.
Yeah. Yeah, McGrath's dropped out.
McGrath's 8 weeks away. Caldwell's still at least 6 to 8 weeks away. Devon Smith, more of a half forward, but might get the odd CBA to kind of roll through there. If you want to know what he's been doing over the past 5 weeks, he's averaged 102 in SuperCoach, 117 in the last 3, with a seasonal average of 87 in that format. He's just priced at 474,000 in Dream Team, which you've alluded to there, Benny. He's priced at 650,000. Average for the year of 86.9. In the past 3, he's gone 113 and a 102 in the last 5. While in AFL Fantasy, of course, those averages are identical, and he's going to set you back 663,000 with a couple of reasonable matchups in the next month. It's Hawthorn this week. That's a real nice matchup. Melbourne, a little bit harder. Geelong, a little bit harder. Then it does get Adelaide and North Melbourne the fortnight after that. By then, of course, they could have a Dylan Shield back. But I like that call, Jordox.
And The other thing with Langford too, which is a little different to some of the guys we've been mentioning, is this is the week for it. His break even's quite low across the board, and he's still a bargain really. So if you have a feeling on Langford, unfortunately, I don't think it's one where you can wait and see. If you like him, grab him this week.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a this week or not, because as Ben mentioned, there's some guys coming, there's some time coming that might impact that ceiling. So yeah, I think it's a now or never kind of call on him. I think it's a good
and
shout.
They're playing the Hawks as well, so it's
a matchup.
Yeah.
He's not going to be as unique as you think, though. Just keep that in mind.
He's growing. He is growing.
Just because of that price, just the price. And he's one of those ones where, because I heard his name a couple of times the last couple of weeks, and I had a look on Monday this week or Tuesday, and I'm like, oh, wow, 4 out of the last 5, he scored a ton. That sort of crept up on me. So
he's doing all right.
a lot will be having a look.
All right, let's talk about our final club coming off the bye. Oh, sorry, mate.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, I'm not too sure about the Hind call. I found him to be an interesting target at this point of the year. I mean, he's been talked about in a lot of various across the formats and you know, all the things we like to read. And I just think, I don't know if he's a target. I don't think he's cheap enough to be a target at this point. He's 100% fantastic to watch, like Benny said. I love watching him. He just goes and goes and goes, but I just think he goes in and out of games too much. I'd like him to just relax for a bit and be a nice pickup to start.
You need him more Ven Shui, do? Is that what you need to see out of him?
Well, he's just hot and cold. I mean, you said before he'll be on 40 or 50 at three-quarter time, and you pull your hair out, and then he finishes on 90. And you're like, whoa, how'd you do that? Or he'll be on 50 at half time. You think, yes, here we go. You finish on 74. So
I think that's just the nature of the player that he is. Because he's not an in and around the ball type of player. He's not a midfielder. He's a rebounding defender. Part of that is so dependent on the ebbs and flows of the game. I think what's so good about Hind is his scoring variation is so small. He's playing every week. He will not get tagged. You've got the likes of Parrish and Merritt running amok through that midfield. And so the fact that his scoring variation in a line to get trust out of this year, out of our forwards, is it's just that he's not going to burn me with a 60 like a Heaney or a side bottom might have the past month or so for a couple of us. He's not going to smash a 120 for you. He's almost your Tom Stewart of the forward line, where it'll be 10 to 15 points every single week. You might get the odd one that's the low 80s. You might get the odd one where you pop a 110, but give or take, he'll be within 5 points almost every week of a 90. And with forwards, I don't know if that's your thought, Ben, but for me with Hind, it's within 5 points of a 90 every single week across the formats. Just get it done. Have some good matchups, including Hawthorn this week. For me, it's a real easy one.
If you do grab him, or you already have him, like I do, don't track your scores live. Just look at the end.
Never do. Enjoy the footy. Never do that.
That's a really good point. Both of you bring up the ebbs and flows of the game for halfbacks mean that scoring is never consistent. We see this even with guys like Sam Doherty. You know,
Jack Bowes. All of them.
He'll be 75 at halftime and he'll finish on 100, and you'll be like, oh, well, he only got 25 in the first half, but in the second half. But the reality is he's a guy that gets the ball about 25 times a game. So he might get 20 of those in the first half. Don't expect him to finish on 40 possessions. It's the way the game's sort of manifesting. It can also be that, you know, Carlton's playing a lot of heavy possession. They realize that that's not working for them. They try and alter the game in
direct route.
Game at halftime. Happens all the time. So don't worry too much about live scores. Have fun with the game. And Hind's a guy that I just love because he keeps on giving effort. When I think a lot of guys are getting really fatigued this time of year, around round 10, round 11, he's a guy that who's going to be giving you heart till the end of the game. So that's just good to watch.
And I think in his first year with them, I think we're going to see next year those little patches of games where he doesn't get it will be minimised, because I think everyone at Essendon's starting to realise get the ball in his hands, because he's bloody good.
That's right. They're getting used to playing with each other as a team for the first time. It's a good call. All right, let's talk about the doggies, because I do want to talk about premium moves off players that are on the bye.
At the doggies.
No, they're rubbish, aren't they, from a fantasy perspective? Give me a couple. All right. We talked about Parrish and spending up the dollars. Is it the same theory with Jackson Macrae? Granted, he's got more than 6 to 8 weeks of runs on the board. Can you go, if you're not a Macrae owner, can you drop the big cash to get him, or do you just have to hold and hope that he doesn't keep doing what he's done for the past 4 years and just build around and against him? What's your take, Jordox?
I think I'm a massive Macrae fan, and he's having some season. Let's be clear. This is a guy who's but this is next level for him. He's on 12 tons in a row or whatever it is.
Yeah. Only player across the formats a ton every game.
Yeah. It's been great. What I'd say with Macrae, yes, you need to get him and you need to pay up for him.
Yep.
But with the butt of his last score was a 114, and for a guy like him, that's not huge. So what that means is his break even will start to creep up, and you could probably wait. Now he could come out and score 140 and smash it out of the park.
Yeah, he probably will.
But if he comes out with another similar score, like if he hits a 108, well, what are they going? They're going down to the Cattery, taking on Geelong. I mean, that's going to be a tough game.
Sure.
If he can score a low ton, those 2 games, a 114 low ton, you will see him drop. Not by much. You're not grabbing him as a bargain.
Yeah.
But you can still get this guy without paying the absolute top dollar. That's what you got to do with these guys. It's like for those who don't have a Grundy or a Gawn, you just got to wait for when they have what we would call a bad game for them. It's still an elite game for most, and that's when you can pounce.
Yeah.
I'll dispute that at one a little bit.
Awesome.
I think a guy like Jack Macrae, you don't worry so much about the break even. In my view, I look at Jack Macrae and I think, when's the fixture? Because a guy like Jack Macrae, you're going to be captaining him. So I'm purely looking for him as being he is the guy that I need to captain in that fixture.
Yeah.
I refer back to Max Gawn or even Brodie Grundy back around round 7, round 8. He had a couple of games against Gold Coast who didn't have a ruck, and then Essendon who didn't have a ruck. His price was around 840,000, but I think that was the right time to buy, even though it didn't quite pan out in the end. He was the clear captain for both those weeks. Now his break even, could have been 150, it could have been 160. I still think that's the right time to bring them in. You're also looking at a variation of about 20,000. So it's not huge. It's not a big deal. I'd rather try and find, the Lachie Neale that's got a break even of 160 and hasn't shown us that ceiling yet. And so we can go and bank our Jack Macrae knowing that he's going to give us 120 every week.
Yeah.
Just as a bit of a different sort of thought on or outlook on the Uber premium.
It's good. Yeah, good call.
Absolutely. And I hear what you're saying, and you're right. And everyone's going to play the game differently. I reckon we get caught up a bit much with the matchups. I mean, just looking at Macrae's 2 worst scores of the year, Dream Team and Fantasy, and this is how good he's been. It's a 103 and a 101. But his 2 lowest scores of the year were against North Melbourne and Carlton, and 2 sides who I probably look at that fixture and think, oh yeah, here comes a big captain score for Macrae. So trying to get one of these big dogs is different ways to do it. I think what we'd agree on, Benny, is if you don't have a Jack Macrae, however you get him in,
it'll cost you a lot of cash to get him whenever you get him.
It will, but it would be a wise move, I would have thought.
It's a great reminder for those that went against Macrae at the start of the year, whether it was the narrative of the Bulldogs sharing or whatever it is, when it's these big dogs that are going to be captaincy options most weeks. And yes, we can't start with everyone. I understand that. But it's a nice narrative reminder for those that are looking at Macrae going, oh gosh, I just can't ever seem to find a time to trade him in. Life lesson for you in Fantasy Coach. Players like that, you start them. And that's how you play the game. That's why you start with the Max Gawn types, your Macrae types, the guys that you're like, I don't think there'll ever be a great time unless an injury, like which happened to Lachie Neale, that impacted his scoring so much of the season. A guy, if he's fit and firing like Macrae, you're probably not going to do it. It was like that Ablett at his peak, Tom Mitchell at his peak, Tom Rockcliffe at his peak, Dane Swan at his peak, Scott Pendlebury at his peak, all these guys, Jake Lloyd, probably up until before this season, the past 2 to 3 years. You want them, you got to start them because you're not getting them more than 20 to 30,000 cheaper than what you started him. Bond's probably in a similar realm, but go there for me.
Can I just add to that, MJ, just quickly? McRae is an amazing fantasy player. We all know that.
Yep.
I probably, if I didn't own him now, I would be thinking, okay, I'm not going to have him for the season.
Go against him.
I'd be looking at guys like a Mitch Duncan. You know, Mitch Duncan right now, he's got a break even of 200. He's priced around 760 in DreamTeam. In 2 weeks, he's going to be at 685.
Yeah.
He has the scoring potential over a short to medium burst of maybe getting within 5 points of McRae or somewhere near there.
Near the same. Yeah.
Getting very creative. You want to be starting with McRae. It's such a headache to be bringing in a guy at 860. We were just talking about Parrish.
Yeah.
Get creative with it. I think Mitch Duncan's an amazing guy to be bringing in a fortnight's time.
Yeah, there's a couple of them. Bont's in that similar price. So if he's right towards the top of the tree, look, if he's your favorite player, you probably should have started him. But again, it's at that similar point of the damage is done. If you're playing the rankings game, go and look at what's unique in that bracket. Look at who's unique in those matchups in your leagues. Do those kind of things and see if there's, like Benny said, a comparable option of run, of fixture, better price, all that stuff to roll through. Daniel and Bailey Dale, have both been nice and solid for us across the year. I don't think either of those players are going to win you a season, but they're probably not going to cost you a season by trading them in. There is one Bulldog I want to talk about. I think in AFL fantasy is probably more flavorable to go into, and that is not a real word, but shut up, I'm going for it. And that's Lockie Hunter. He's since the injuries to the midfield with Treloar and Dunkley both going out, he's moved from that half forward role, which was why he picked up forward eligibility in AFL fantasy, back up to a little bit more of the wing. And so certainly he's on coaches' radars this week, more in AFL fantasy because he is forward eligible in that format. He's got a break even of 82. He's going to set you back 642,000. 7.5% of coaches own him. And in SuperCoach, he's probably had a better ceiling over the past couple of weeks because he's got a 3-week rolling average of 112, but only averaging 91 over the totality of the year. Again, remember, up until a month ago, he wasn't really playing his preferred midfield wing role, rather high half forward at best. Here's my question I want to throw out. I think in AFL fantasy, he looks great, but outside of round one, he's just had the 1 ton. And that was in round 10 against St Kilda, and that was a 102. Yep, the past 3, 99, 93, 102. So he's great. He's solid, but there's not ceiling there. SuperCoach, oddly enough, he's priced in that format at 511. He's like 60K more than Cripps. So I'm taking Cripps. I'm sorry, Lockie. I'm taking Paddy Cripps over you there. But in the past month there, he's gone 101, 111, 126, 101. So he's good, but the ceiling doesn't feel like it's there. So is this where we look at Hind? Is this where we just look at it? Talk to me through this, lads.
MJ, I think a week or two ago, you might have mentioned something along the lines of Josh Kelly not having a great ceiling this year.
But his history was. I just said he hasn't shown it so far.
Yeah, well, Lockie Hunter's had a history of having some decent scores, hasn't he?
He does.
That might be the case that he might have a big back after the season, I think.
I think if he stays through that wing role, there is value for money.
I like Hunter in AF. I think he's not being talked about. I think he's going to be just that little bit more unique. Obviously, Josh Kelly is miles ahead of him at the minute.
Sure.
Lockie Hunter, he does have a bit of a history of coming home like a steam train. I'm just with a few of these years. And look, obviously 2018 is the big one. It's a while ago. He finished with 2, 4, 6, 8 tons in a row in DreamTeam. And even last year, it's hard to work out, but he finished with about 6 games in a row over 80, which is, last year's ton equivalent. What I'll say though, I'm not saying he's going to go and do a Josh Kelly because Josh Kelly's completely gone back to that role. I don't think Hunter's completely gone back to the role we saw him in last year and in recent years when he's been that magnet. I think he's pretty damaging forward of the ball, and I think they like him there. So we're not going to see a complete shift, I don't think. But what I will say is he's a forward option.
In fantasy.
And in fantasy, yeah. Sorry, I preface by saying I'm talking purely fantasy. I don't think you would look twice at him in the others as a pure mid, but as a forward. Scores haven't been on fire, but I can see him coming home pretty strong, even with that half forward role still being thereabouts.
Yeah, we're about 4 to 6 weeks away from both of Treloar and Dunkley coming back, but we mentioned this with Nick Hind. It's a line we've been struggling to get. Again, this is purely AFL fantasy where he's forward. It's a line we're struggling to get a bankable 90 and a little bit of scoring deviation either side. It's a line where we're struggling to get ceiling consistently. Yes, we're getting it at the moment with guys like Hall and also Josh Kelly. But for me, in AFL fantasy, over the next 6 weeks, if I was to put who are the guys that over the next 6 weeks are going to score the most amount of points through the forward line? Hunter's in that group of 6 top scoring guys for me, without any question. And so
it's an absolute no-brainer.
Yeah, for me, it's a no-brainer in AFL fantasy.
With Dunkley and Treloar, if you are a little nervous of them coming in at the tail end, I mean, I can't see them being rushed back. I think the Doggies, if they can shore up a top 4 spot,
that's it.
Get them right for finals. So.
Yeah, and you got 2 trades a week. In 6 weeks' time, when they're both back in AFL fantasy, which is finals time, and that is the case in those final 4 weeks of the year, you should have finished your side off in 6 weeks' time in AFL fantasy, even though cash generation can sometimes be harder with the weekly price moves. So it's not as big a move sometimes in a player. In 6 weeks' time, you're not rolling around with John Newcomb still on the field. You're not rolling around with Trent Bianco or a Caleb Poulter still on the field. These guys are gone and done and moved on. And so, yeah, if the worst case scenario of Hunter drops back to that high half forward role, in 6 weeks' time, go and get somebody else. Dangerfield's in that format. Pendlebury's in that format. Gosh, go and get Dunkley himself in that format. So, yeah, for me, I think it's a no-brainer. Yeah, it's an easy move. No-brainer. It's like Kelly last week in AFL fantasy. I've seen a few people like, Kelly was awesome. I'm like, of course he is. He's playing in his midfield role where he's a 110 guy.
He's been awesome well before last week.
He's been awesome well before last week. And as the sole long-suffering member of the Josh Kelly club since round 1, I feel justified slightly with my hold at this point. But it was an easy...
He wasn't even terrible. I know he would have been frustrating for you, but he wasn't even terrible. He was
fine.
Hitting 90.
Oh, yeah. That's the thing.
Yeah, Hunter's an absolute no-brainer. I think we can hit this one in the tail, but Hunter's a no-brainer. I would be taking Hunter ahead of Langford for anyone out there that's looking at Langford as well.
I'd go Hunter, Green, Langford. If you want to put those 3, that would be the way I'd do it. Toby Green, here's what I'll say about him. There's a question from a Patreon that wants to know value forward. Look, it's not super value, but it's value. Toby Green's scoring deviation across the year is about that 90 with 10 points either side. Look at his inaccuracy in front of goals. It's generally about 1 goal 5, 1 goal 4, 1 goal 6, 2 goals 4. What happens? Because there will be a game or multiple games where he kicks them all and he'll bang you the 130. Oh, and by the way, when the game was on the line and they were trying to beat North Melbourne, where did Leon Cameron put Toby Green? I don't know. I vaguely remember him being put into the midfield. What does Toby Green do when he's in the absolute midfield? It reminds me, Ben, if I cast my mind back to the grand final season of the GWS Giants of 2018, where by necessity...
I'm looking at it now.
By necessity of 2019, they had to play him through the midfield at the back end of the year because there were plenty of midfielders missing. Here's what he did for the last few weeks in Dream Team and Fantasy: 144, 115, 126, 146, 142, 99 in SuperCoach, 138, 112, 107, 134, 122, and a 115 in SuperCoach. You want a guy that can ceiling and that can win it for you? Is Toby Green. You want a guy that even if he plays forward, he's going to be a 90 or there and thereabouts? Is Toby Green. Oh, but he's got a bad injury history. Welcome to the forward line of 2021. Everybody's got a bad injury history.
Welcome to fantasy in 2021.
And so pull the trigger on the guy that's got, I think, the best ceiling in the forward line, barring Patrick Dangerfield. I think he's got a better ceiling than Aaron Hall. across the formats. So for me, I'm on the Toby Green train this week.
He even has a great draw, MJ.
Sorry, mate.
He even has a great draw, mate.
Oh, talk me through the fixture, Ben.
Oh, it's an absolute. This is one of those things where we look at the draw and we get really excited, but I think the Giants one has taken it to a whole new level. So we've got Carlton in round 14. Pretty good game.
That's tasty.
Hawthorn round 15.
Delicious.
Very good game. Melbourne round 16. A more difficult game.
Sure.
But then he's got Gold Coast 17. Sydney in 18 at home. Essendon 19.
Yep.
Plays Port, Geelong, Richmond, and Carlton, which are all okay fixtures, but it's the next sort of 4, 5, 6 weeks, up until the Essendon game in round 19. They are exceptional fixtures, and he's just got the scoring potential, and he's someone that does like to beat up on the bad teams as well, which is an aspect we all love about our fantasy footballers. So you can't go wrong with Toby Green. I do, like you mentioned before, I have Lockie Hunter a fair bit up in the pecking order of those two.
In AF, yeah.
But, I mean, if Toby Green has the midfield role, I would say he's like the Darcy Parish.
Yeah.
He's unstoppable. So, any possibility of that occurring is incredible. And even if it doesn't, you've still got a 90 forward. So there's
no downside. Yeah. That's good.
I could offer an alternate view because I've heard Green's name this week and last week, and look, everything you're saying is right. For me, there's just too many ifs. If a Giants midfielder, hopefully this doesn't happen, did go down and there was some sort of permanent change where Green went to the midfield,
sure,
he is the must-have of the comp, right?
Yeah.
Across any line. If, like you said, he kicks straight. I'm looking at his scores. He's scored 3 tons. This is DreamTeam. And 2 of those were low tons where he kicked 5 in both games. So as a forward, he's not bad, but I don't know. I reckon there's risk with him.
I think that the thing is though too, because there is risk with him. There is actually, if you want to, there is risk with every forward we have available to us. So let me walk you through who we got kind of top 10 across the lines, and because you can build a narrative around there's risk in everybody. Jack Zeeble, been top forward for the year for us. Luke McDonald's back. Robbie Tarrant's back. That's some experienced ball users and a key defender that structures them up a little bit where there's not that need to intercept. What does that do to Zeeble's score? We don't know, but we can build a case where we go, I'm not too sure. And the same too with Aaron Hall. Luke McDonald had that role that Hall has right now last year and won a best and fairest and was exceptional in that. So does Luke McDonald take points and roll off either of these guys? Possibly. We don't know. And for non-owners of those players, you're going, please, yes, let it happen. Dane Zorko, he was been brilliant this year, but he's also one of the most prone players of giving away free kicks. If you've owned him since round 1, how many times does he just give free kicks away? He's also prone to a tag through there. So there's our risk. Dustin Martin.
And Neil's back with him as well.
And Neil's back with him. So there's points in there. McCluggage has got better. Lyons has got better. Okay, that's some interesting thing. Dusty Martin, everybody owns him, but he's not really shown a ceiling game for us since round 2. Okay, so if we're forecasting who's the top guy from now to the end of the year, is Dusty in that conversation? Well, maybe. It depends on how many must-win games Richmond have to have, and whether or not he needs to turn it on into Dusty finals mode or not. Still side bottom. A goal after the siren this week saved him from being outperformed by Tracy in a couple of the formats. And that's not to throw shade on Tracy, but he's been incredibly disappointing for owners across the format. Jarman Impey got a 50 across the formats. Shai Bolton's on the bye, but he's already missed a couple of weeks through injury. And I feel like it's just moments away from teams deciding to shut down and tag him and try to stop what he can actually do through there. Isaac Smith doesn't move the needle at all in terms of scoring ceiling. Nick Hind got thrown forward a couple of weeks ago because Essendon were trying to win the game. Aaron Hall's made of paper mache and anything could go wrong. And then you're looking at key forwards in McDonald, Walker, Norton, and Darling. And I just vomited 3 times in my mouth saying that. All that to say, if you want to build but what if case, you can run the gauntlet for everybody. All you can do is take the information you know. Then, as best with the information you have about any player, make your forecasts. And then off the back of that, what feels right for you in your temperament, you in your coaching style, and you in your objectives. And if Green, you go, the injury history just drives me nuts. I couldn't do it. Okay, we'll go and pick Dusty, who's got great durability historically. That's fine. But the ceiling might be the thing. If you're looking to an attack and go, who could do the Darcy Parish for the next 8 weeks? Well, Green, if he does in that midfield, he's as good as anybody is. So those are the kind of things that I do. What are your objectives? How risk averse are you? Don't do the what if game too far, because otherwise you won't pick anyone ever.
The one I just want to add on. Sorry, Jordan.
You go, Benny.
The one I want to add on.
No, you go.
As well is Toby Green hasn't had a great game, like Jordo just pointed out. Like he's only had 108. That actually excites me a little bit because I don't have any question marks. It comes back to the Josh Kelly, it comes back to Lockie Hunter. We've seen historically these guys have ceiling. I don't have any question marks that Toby Green has ceiling. I don't need to see it every single season to know that he's still a guy that can go out and have 5 goals and get 30 touches of the ball.
Yeah.
So I like to see that he hasn't had it, thinking that okay, the likelihood is he will have 1 or 2 really big games, as we just saw manifest this week with a couple of guys. So that actually gravitates me towards a pick like Toby Green, just for the inverse sort of view or aspect. But,
I like that.
I like the idea with Toby Green. Like it sort of feels like worst case scenario, he's going to be that 85 to 90 guy. Best case scenario, you're going to get absolutely kissed on. It's going to be 110 type average. It's going to be incredible. But yeah, it feels like a lower risk in comparison to basically all the names that you just mentioned, MJ.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I want to throw out this one. Sorry, Jordox, you go, man, and then I'll throw out a thought.
I was just going to say, look, Green, I think the conversation is for Dream Team SuperCoach. I just think in fantasy, there's too many other forwards that you could look at. And the price is what it's a great point you made, Ben, that he will go big at one point. So the price is very tempting.
I'm jumping on him in AFL Fantasy this week. So if anybody else wants to jump on the train with me, feel free to. And we can go down together like the Titanic if we need to. That's totally fine. All right. Here's this thing. We're in round 14, best 18, because it was a hard week for coaches anyway across the formats. With some of the teams we were missing, it was challenging anyway. Then you throw a Richmond and maybe to a smaller extent a West Coast, but definitely guys like Dusty, Short, Hooley, Gaff, Nick Nat for some, and then a couple of cows across some formats. It has stretched a lot of coaches to getting close to a maximum of the 18 available on field. Again, I'm a bigger fan of count your premiums, not the total, but it helps. Sometimes you get a high more. Sometimes you get that ton out of nowhere and it works out for you. Here's my thought, Ben. I want to get your take on it. What's the value of a trade, whether it be going super duper aggressive or sideways trading some of our premiums? It's probably more Dream Team and SuperCoach related, although I think it's relevant. But because they're limited trades, the assumption is if trades are low across the majority of teams, is it better to do a sideways trade for an increase of 100 points this week? Or is it better to try to save the trade for a potential forced injury cover later in the year? And can you make those points up later in the year? What's your take?
Yeah, well, you break it down a little bit with how many weeks we've got left. So we got 10 weeks left right now. If we're getting a trade of, say, we're going a 100-point player to a 100-point player, we're getting one more 100-plus score, and then they have the exact same score for the rest of the season. We're only getting 10 points for that trade over the next 10 weeks.
Yeah.
And to me, that doesn't feel like enough. That feels like substantively less, if I can spit it out, MJ, than what we need to be able to achieve. So we need to be looking at trying to get 25 points per week, sort of minimum, I feel like, with these trades. Now, if you're a team that's in the top, the top 100, you're battling out for a victory or whatever the case might be, you might be looking at, say, Jaden Short is a name that we hear being thrown up a fair bit. Now, he's averaged 90 for the season. He's been very consistent. He just had a great game on the weekend. he's a guy that we can look at and we can say, okay, we think Jaden Short's going to average 90 for the season.
Yep.
We think that Lockie Whitfield's going to average 100 for the season. We'll get 100 extra points with Whitfield this week. We'll also get 10 extra points for the rest of the season. So
190 points better off. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll be 200, and that feels much more like a sort of a fairly good trade. But I think we do need to see a little bit of a jump in average, or alternatively, we need to be able to get a lot of cash. So Dan Houston is a name that I'm sort of seeing popped out in a few different places. He's at 530K right now. If you go down from Jaden Short to Houston, that's 110K.
In DreamTeam,
they're probably going to basically average about the same. You feel like Houston's had a bit of a slower start to the season, but he's a 90 guy every day of the week. That's 110,000 savings, which maybe potentially allows you to go and get a Toby Green or facilitates a trade for a Lockie Neal. So we're always looking at what else does it allow you to do. We're always planning 3 weeks in advance. We are always planning 3 weeks in advance. I think that's the main sort of point. So I would say like for like, no, don't do that. 100 points for this week and then nothing in the future doesn't really excite me. And extra points, getting a little bit of a mini upgrade, so to speak, that's a good move. Going down, but getting the same sort of type of points, we saw that a good move earlier in the season was a Dyson Heppel. He was a guy that was sort of around that 300,000 mark. We got him to our 95 type average.
Yep.
We're always looking to get like guys that are undervalued. So Houston, a short to Houston, I like that type of deal. A short to a Whitfield, I like that type of deal. I don't like a short to say a Daniel Rich, who might be more like a 90 guy when everything sort of finishes up.
Yeah.
That's a good answer.
It's a good answer.
Yeah.
Can I throw a name that I'm thinking about is an Andrew Gaff. An Andrew Gaff, if you own him, is he someone that you could move on at a loss because he's dropped a heap of cash? I'm fairly bullish he'll bounce back from what he's doing the last few weeks. He'll have a run where he gets on it again. But just philosophically, a player who is a primo who's underperforming, could you move him on in his buy to, let's not say a Parish, but let's just say a Josh Kelly who's on the up?
Okay.
Not a money saver. I'm talking spending.
Spend on top of. I think the first thing you always do is,
what Ben said before with Short down to Houston, I thought was that perfect example where you can turn a problem into a cash opportunity where it's similar output of points, but you get the money. What if it's the other way around with Gaff?
I think for me, the first thing is using Gaff as the example. What is the projected average you think he's going to do between now to the end of the year? Look at the history, look at the fixture, look at what he's going to do, look at the games at home, all that sort of stuff. And from there, map out what you think he does. And if you go, he's 100 from now to the end of the year. Okay, cool. So it's the same thing. You still do that mapping out of what it actually is. If it's 150K, you've got to chuck on top of it. Let's use a Kelly as the example, because varying formats, it's around about that perspective. What's Josh Kelly between now to the end of the year? Okay, map that out. Is that trade that you spend and that salary cap that you spend, is that the best way to increase the points available to your team from now to the end of the year? Or could you put that onto another player this week in another line or in another spot? The good news is there's multiple ways to get there. It's the question of also then how many cows do you still have on the field? The objective of success is getting cash cows off the field as quickly as possible. And is doing a Gaff to a Kelly trade, is that going to slow your plans down for 3 to 5 weeks? So instead of completing your team in 2 weeks, it's now going to be 5 weeks because you're now having to stump up more cash. So that's another factor to kind of go in through there. But as far as I'm concerned, if you only think a Gaff's a 90 guy from now to the end of the year and he's driving you nuts, pull the freaking trigger. So like in a forward line, it might be, it's different, but it might be an Isaac Heaney. He's different because you probably purchased him as value and he's not. Maybe Steel Side Bottom's a better contrast. If Sidey's driving you nuts and you think you can get a better score for a minimal upgrade and it's not going to affect your plans, go for it. Also, If you are legit in contention to win this sucker, this is the week to attack, because this week there are coaches that are struggling to get not just 18 on field, 16 on field. This is the week that coaches are struggling to get more than 10 premiums on field. And if you can plan it well, and you know what your team looks like in a month, you know the cash cows that are coming through that you know you can get, this is your last big attacking week left to go. And so if you're within 100 points per week from now to the end of the year off the overall leader, I think it's a little bit harder in Dream Team. If you're not in the top couple, you're in trouble. I think in SuperCoach and AFL Fantasy, you can make up a little bit more there. Then yes, you go for that. If you think you can make up those total points over the year with the trade and an upgrade this week, go nuts. But if you go, like you said, I think Gaff goes back to doing Gaff things. That was a paraphrase. Why the freak would you trade him then? But that's only if you think he is. If you don't think he is going to be that, then why would you keep a 90 guy when you can get a 110 guy?
Just on Gaffy, I do think Kelly and Shuey coming back will help. So if you do have Gaff, he will be all right. Yep. But it's a good example, isn't it, of a guy who's lost cash, you know, and now it's his buy. It's like, oh, here's an opportunity to just...
I'd be buying low on Gaff just quietly in Dream Team and Fantasy.
People might pick him up if he goes big next week.
Yeah, I'd buy low on him. You're right. Kelly, back in a couple of weeks. Finally back, looked really good through that midfield. He was, along with a couple others, the prime reason they won that game against Richmond. Shuey's playing in the waffle this week. You get him back out on that wing over to Rome. Yeah, I get the point, though. Anything you want to add on that, Benny, before we get to some other questions from our Patreons?
No, mate, you nailed that.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate the vote of self-confidence for you on that one through there. We've talked about sidewaysing premiums a little bit through there, so I don't think we need to do it. Let's hit some of our Patreon questions before we wrap up this episode. Sarah wants to know, Ben, I'll throw this one to you. She plays AFL Fantasy. She's got a bunch of other questions through there. I think we've covered them for you, Sarah, but this one we haven't. Is it too soon to be looking at Matt Rao? That's her question.
Soon. It's never too soon, MJ. In all honesty, it probably is too soon. But look, he's
you can look, just don't touch.
Very exciting. If you love Matt Rao, you want to do it early. He's going to probably take I would say 3 or 4 weeks to really find his footing. He did struggle again on the weekend, but absolutely buy him when he hits his bottom price, because he's going to be one that we love for the next 10 years, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a good call. Stephen wants to know, it's an AFL fantasy question for you, Jordox. Is it too early to trade Caleb Poulter? After trades, including Poulter, he'll have 19 on field, but it does include, with the only rookies on field, Kazitsky and Newman. Are you happy in AFL fantasy to pull the trigger on Caleb Poulter this week?
Well, it comes back to what we were saying before, doesn't it? About, the aim of this period is to get as many of those kids off the field. And he's been excellent, Poulter. But he does have the bye. I'm just trying to see. So after trades, he'll have 19 on field, with only rookies being Cozzy and Newcomb. I guess it depends who you're going to. If it's an upgrade, I know these kids have been good, but I'll use Bianco as an example, probably a different example, because Poulter's been doing it for longer. But, Bianco, I thought, was going to be someone that we could just sit for a while at D6 or in your midfield if that's where you had him. And then he turned out a 30, which really took me by surprise. I'm not suggesting Poulter does that, but I think we just got to remember they are kids. So if it's an opportunity there to upgrade him to someone and you want to do it, your only rookies left are Cozzy and Newcomb.
The answer is yes. You trade him. If it gets you to a premium, the answer is yes. I want nothing to do with Collingwood players, with the exception of Scott Pendlebury and Brodie Grundy, until I see what Robert Harvey does with this team. It could mean they go full kid mode. It could mean they go full John Barker mode, where he puts the old established blokes back, or which Teague did the same till they get a job. Caretaker coaches can do a bunch of different things. So outside of the proven legit guns, get the kids off the ground, get a premium in, enjoy the extra week. In AFL Fantasy, you'll get cash generation elsewhere.
With that question, though, for Stephen, I think another question I'd add on that is if he's got 19, could he trade Cozzy instead and have 18? Because Cozzy's just going to go down in value.
Cozzy will get you a 40 every week. So the question is, are you trading Poulter because you need the cash to make an upgrade? And if that's the case, go nuts. But if it's about points on field this week, at best you're getting a 40 from Kaczynski. He's not going to play Adelaide every week for the one game where he scored well for us this year. For me, get the kids off the ground. Yeah. And if Poulter's the way to get there.
What's the chance Cozzy's score would be in his 18 anyway? But anyway, there's some things to think about.
All right, there you go. A couple more questions we'll fly through. Ian McRae wants to know, Ben, what do you think the difference is going to be between Sean Darcy and Brodie Grundy from round 15 to the end of the year? Both aren't playing this week because of the bye. Grundy should be back healthy under Robert Harvey, and with Darcy having, to be fair, a breakout 6 weeks. Who do you think scores more between now and the end?
Yeah. Do we have to answer this one?
Yes, mate, we do.
I think it's fairly comfortably the big Collingwood man. I think it's probably comfortable to the tune of about 30 points a week or so.
That's a tasty.
I think that's his question, and we think it's fairly obvious. Let's rephrase it though. Okay. What if Ian has actually picked up Darcy in recent weeks?
Yes.
Can he ride him to the end, or does he still absolutely have to turn him into Grundy before?
No, he doesn't have to, because it's about what did you do then? So if you did Grundy to Darcy 2 weeks ago, you've banked across the formats, give or take 250 to 300 points, give or take. Let's say 250 to round it across the formats. So you're already 250 points ahead. You also probably saved yourself a couple of 100,000. What did you do with that? So now it's not just Darcy v Grundy for the final 9 games of the year. It's Darcy v Grundy. What's the gap? And have you made up that points gap across the trades of what you've done in these past 2 weeks and the upgrades it's enabled you? So you always look at it in totality. You never look at it a Grundy v Darcy if you did it a couple of weeks ago. If it's from round 15, well, then it is Grundy v Darcy, unless it's a Grundy and a Darcy plus this, because it saves you the upgrade. That's how you need to look at it. If it's just a pure 1-for-1 and there's a price difference, it's the wrong way to look at it.
And just on that as well, Darcy plus this, whatever that was, has been an exceptionally good move.
Yeah.
So, if this fan of ours is actually, or this commenter has actually said, hey, he's gone down that route, plaudits to you, mate.
Well done, man.
It's been an exceptional move. And I was sort of, talking it down a couple of weeks ago because I just don't think that Darcy's the type of guy that I'd necessarily gravitate towards. He's always had a huge history of injuries and whatever the case might be, but he's made me eat my words. He's done exceptionally well, and you should be absolutely stoked, and you've got to factor in that 25 points.
Yeah.
To do it in SuperCoach too, because if I was doing the Darcy move, it would have been fantasy because you can flip him forward, but to do it in SuperCoach or Dream Team, you're right.
Yeah, well done, Ballsy, if you've done that. If not, there's some nice, tasty meatballs from the coaches panel to help you through. All right, lads, we are done on this episode. There's a bunch of other questions. Yes, go.
Before we finish, now, if I wasn't on the pod, I would have typed on Facebook this question. So I'll put it to you.
Go.
Can you pick up
No, I
a
don't
kid on the bubble?
Yes.
A kid on the bubble.
Yep.
Who's got the bye? I'm talking Amati, I think that's how you pronounce it, and Edwards at West Coast are 2 that I'm looking at.
Sure.
Can you pick up 1 or 2 of those if you've still got 18? Is it too risky to get a week ahead?
The first one is, do you have Newcomb? Because if you don't, he's the one to get. If you do have Newcomb already,
good call.
The only reason you're doing it is because for this reason, both this week and next week, it is the only way to do the moves you want to do. And so this week you're trading into him because it helps you with an upgrades that you must achieve this week and or next week. That's the only reason I could get behind an Amateur, an Edwards, or a Foley kind of week ahead, is because if you don't do it this week, you can't do it next week, or you can't make the upgrade plans, or you can't get the guy at the break even at their want. The only thing I would say about all of those guys is just look at who's coming back into the team and how long they might be there. As great as Luke Edwards was, it was one great quarter. It was one great quarter, and it was a really great quarter. But if you're a Finlay McRae, he did. But if you're a Finlay McRae owner, you know what it's like to just have one great quarter. Now, I know it's very, very different circumstances there, but it's one great quarter, but he's shown a sign. The Norm Smith medalist from 2019, he's going to be back next time that West Coast play. He's playing in the Waffle this week. West Coast are desperate to do everything they can to get home final opportunities. They're going to want to get some synergy back into that midfield. So as good as he is, Edwards, you can't guarantee that you would keep a 2-game player in the midfield over him. Now, I don't think it's as simple and as easy as that. Put it back as Tim
Kelly.
And a Tim Kelly, who's not far off too. You always, when trading in, how have they got their opportunity? Why are they getting their opportunity? What's the narrative? And then it's if you're trading in a guy that won't play this week, it's got to help you this week and next week. If it doesn't, don't blow up a trade.
And on the Eagles inclusions, would you put Amati ahead of Edwards based on the fact that Amati's already keeping Sinclair out?
Yep.
Done.
Yeah, I would. DPP, it helps those that either have Josh Tracy or want to get buy into Rowan Marshall. So it's not just about that. It opens up DPP, which Edwards doesn't. And so for me, I'd put Amity. If I was to trade into one, he's the one I have the most felt comfort that he's going to be okay for me. That's perfect. Not for everyone. Benny, for you, would you add on to anything to that?
No, I agree with all of that. I think the DP rookies are extremely important. They're extremely important throughout any period of the season. It's why we loved Anthony Scott even at the start of the season. It's one of the key learnings from my fantasy season actually was the fact that when you've got a Caleb Poulter or even the little midfielder from DP, Devin Robertson as well.
Yeah.
The Brisbane guy. When these guys are DP players and they're playing midfield, you've just got to get them in. That was the big miss for me. So I love my DP players at the rookie basement price. Just get them in, and Amati's shown so much for us already. So no brainer.
All right, there you go. There's some thoughts, some nice questions. Well done to both of you lads. Appreciate your work on this podcast. If you want to go and check out any of the other episodes we've dropped throughout the season thus far, you can find them wherever you're listening to this bad boy right now. Just go back in. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star rating and review. Make sure you follow us across Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're getting this. Articles dropping every single day at coachespanel.tv. If you're playing through the bye rounds in your draft league, mate, Jordox has just dropped a couple of one-hit wonders that'll get you through this week. There's some nice, tasty options. Doozy. It's a little ripper in there to go and check out. Thursday morning, which is about the time most of you are going to be listening to this, you'll get a little article from me about my best buys coming off the multi-buy round, and there'll be the break-evens and a bunch of other stuff at coachespanel.tv. All right, lads, that is a massive podcast episode. Appreciate your work, and thank you to you for listening throughout this episode. Hopefully this week goes your way. You get yourself a couple of high moors, all your upgrades work out for you, and you get the bloke that dominates with the VC or C this week. From all of us here at the Coaches Panel, good luck. We'll chat to you next week.